Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me today. It is good to be back. I had some much needed time off and relaxation, so it's good to be back here with all of you. Today we're finally bringing to you our TJPS special report, Eroding Freedoms, Republicans' War on Democracy in the States. I know that the news is getting crazy and there was a lot of focus on federal government and what's happening there. There's a lot to get to with that in terms of Signalgate and everything that is just absolutely bizarre and wild, a major national security breach. But I want to talk about tonight what's going on in the states, because there was a lot of focus, not nearly enough focus about what's going on in the states. Of course, just this week, there is going to be a huge special election in the state of Florida to see if the Democrats can flip that seat, which would numerically make them a step closer to really taking back control of the House of Representatives, which is already such a slim majority that just this week, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, decided, hey, Elise Stefanik, I know we picked you to be the UN ambassador, but we're going to have to, run for Congress again or something, because I took too many Republicans out of Congress. Now the House majority is slipping away, which was something, if you were on Donald Trump's team, you could have told him, but it was like, shh. Be hush-hush about this. Keep letting him take people out of Congress so that Democrats can, in effect, kind of win back some seats in Congress. And that's exactly what's happening right now. So the House majority for Republicans is slipping away right now. But just with that, I wanted to talk about what's happening in the states tonight, because there is a lot going on. And tonight we're going to bring you a special report, something that's been in the work for about 3 weeks now, which really should not have taken this long. But I needed to relax and to compartmentalize and also to reset. And I want to bring this to you tonight, particularly because about what's going to be happening this week. Also, what just happened yesterday in the state of Louisiana. We're going to start here. This is Ronald Reagan on your screen. And in the closing months of the 1980 presidential election, Ronald Reagan, with his campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," realized that he needed to capitalize on that message by traveling to the Deep South and essentially telling his supporters or telling people what he actually meant by that. And he needed a specific population's vote. He had to convince one more section of the United States that, hey, you can trust me, vote for me. And the people that he was seeking after weren't just any type of people. These were not just ordinary people in the South that he needed to appeal to win the election. These people were specifically supporters of staunch segregationist George Wallace. George Wallace, of course, believed that blacks and whites should never go to school together, that blacks should be beaten and suppressed and oppressed because of the fact that they are inferior to whites. And so that's exactly who Reagan was trying to appeal to, those people. And so on August 3rd, 1980, Reagan shows up at the Neshoba County Fair in Mississippi to address a huge crowd of people, of all white people, who were raving to see the former California governor deliver his speech. What was this guy going to say? And so Reagan finally arrives. He gets up to the podium and proclaims, "I believe in states' rights." Essentially, the very first few words that he says is, "I believe in states' rights." And the crowd goes wild. They love it. Because, of course, for Reagan to say that, Reagan is saying this at a time that the federal government is seen as this progressive, bureaucratic, overbearing machine that was becoming too much of a nuisance to the states, especially the Deep South. Because, of course, in the South, they wanted to make their own laws, specifically segregationist laws, specifically laws that were either stripping away rights from minorities or making sure that they would stay suppressed in terms of, their political representation or wanting to even vote or willing to do things like make a major change among local businesses. They were wanting to consistently suppress minorities in the states. And states' rights was a way to do it. And so to have Ronald Reagan come down to the South and to say that, specifically where 16 years prior, 3 civil rights workers were viciously murdered in Neshoba County by the police, and they all tried to cover it up. For him to say that sent a very clear message. Reagan was not only down with the racists, it was also clear that his campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," actually meant something deeper and darker. And so if this guy got elected president, he was going to be a states' rights kind of president. And it worked. And a decisive, huge electoral victory. And after winning the election, this was Reagan on Inauguration Day talking about how the government is the problem and we need to dial it back a bit.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise.
Quote, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. You see, there's a reason you don't want the states to have too much power and why there is an established federal government. Because if you start concentrating too much power in the states, the theory that there is an all-powerful or that there is essentially a powerful central federal government to keep the states in check becomes laughable because it's non-existent. It's inconspicuous. And each individual state with too much concentrated power can become its own small dictatorship. That's exactly what happened in the racist South back then. Many states became their own small dictatorships in terms of challenging the federal government. Oh, really? You want us to stop segregation? Well, come stop me, Mr. President. You want us to allow blacks to come into schools? Well, come stop me, Mr. President. How many times did George Wallace or other governors pull off that back in the states? It was the states versus the federal government. You want to do something? Come stop me. There is a reason why there is a federal government. And if not, of course, you're going to have small dictatorships. And that's very easy to accomplish because your local government is in itself its own minuscule federal government. I mean, you have all three branches of government. You have your courts, you have the legislative branch, and you also have the governor. The governor, of course, also has the National Guard as well, control of the National Guard. You also have the courts, which have judges, which has your state Supreme Court, which has your local district attorneys, which has your attorney generals, your prosecutors. And of course, other elected officials as well. And, just give one of them, give just one of them or all of them too much power, especially if their party is in control. with the thought or the conception to inflict as much irreparable harm on the population as possible that does not favor them, or to enrich and to empower themselves further, you are going to have a situation where a small dictatorship is created. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Last year, Democrats won up and down the ballot in North Carolina. And the only seat that they lost was the state auditor. And as Republicans were on their way out of the majority in the state legislature last year, they included in their legislation that they would strip power away from the newly elected Democrats. This is from my book, Resistance. Quote, They refer to the bill as hurricane relief, although its true intentions are authoritarian. It would not allow the governor to appoint liberal-leaning judges to the courts. Instead, he would be legally constrained to appoint pre-selected Republican-favored judges. Nor would he be allowed to appoint members of his own party to serve on the state election board. Also, the newly elected Democratic Attorney General would be prevented to take legal action against any of these new rules, even if they are in violation of state law. This new legislation would also give the powers of election certification and oversight to the hands of the state auditor. Why such an inexplicable move? It's the only Republican statewide seat they won. Not to mention, will be controlled by Trump-endorsed candidate Dave Bullock upon taking office next year. North Carolina residents have strongly voiced their opposition and protested this new bill, even during this legislative session in the halls of the state capitol. Governor Roy Cooper just vetoed the bill, but it's important to keep an eye on this story because Republicans, if more members join in, could override that veto and make this law. It is seeing stories like these locally that demand a loud, vehement, and condemning chorus of civilian voices to raise the alarm, mount pressure, expose and stop such anti-democratic measures from passing or succeeding. Research and organize. The power of local activism is a major protector of democracy. Do not allow your state, city, or county to become an authoritarian stronghold. Know your rights and protect them. End quote. Despite loud pushback and protests, Republicans did override former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's veto. And Josh Stein, along with all the other Democrats that were elected when Josh Stein became governor last year, along with all the other newly elected Democrats, they took office with less power. And I said Democrats won up and down the ballot in North Carolina, despite the presidential election. It was not just, the governor's race and the attorney general's race that they won. They also won the Supreme Court. They also retained their seat on the Supreme Court. In North Carolina's Supreme Court race, it was a huge pivotal race last year. And the incumbent there, Democrat Allison Riggs, she defeated her opponent. Allison Riggs won by 714 votes against Republican Jefferson Griffin, and he could not accept that result. He tried to get the Clay County Board of Elections to do something about it. They dismissed it in all caps, as you can see here. This is dismissed. And really, he has been in court ever since. But what he's trying to do is sinister, and it's also extremely anti-democratic. It's also quite literally voter suppression. It's literally the textbook definition of voter suppression. I don't like that a lot of these people voted for a certain candidate, or I think that these votes are illegitimate because I was not the victor in this election, so I'm going to seek to have these votes legally tossed. That is the textbook definition for voter suppression. And essentially what is happening here in the state of North Carolina is that Jefferson Griffin, the Republican in the race who lost this election, is trying to overturn the results of this election. And multiple recounts have already affirmed that Allison Riggs is the winner of this election. And still, he remains persistent and consistent on the fact that 65,000 votes need to be thrown out because they are illegitimate votes. Because, if we could just throw out 65,000 votes, not to mention I lost by 714, but, let's just completely wipe the slate clean here. Let's throw out 65,000 votes. 65,000 votes of legitimate people who voted in a legitimate local democracy to elect a legitimate judge. And you're trying to throw out those votes. We've covered this here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show before. If you follow us on our other platforms, we've been talking about this consistently because this race is insane, what's been happening here. And yes, there has been protest and demand to stop what's happening here, but it's also just even insane that this is even happening in the first place and not receiving enough attention as it should. According to reporting from Doug Clark at ProPublica, Jefferson Griffin is not alone in this effort. Apparently, this was a premeditated attack on North Carolinians in which many are now heavily concerned that their votes can be thrown out. Because ultimately here, Griffin's goal is to get his buddies at the North Carolina State Supreme Court to rule in his favor. Because what that would look like, as they have also said themselves, which they are inclined to rule for him, that would look like overturning the incumbent Democrat here, Allison Riggs' victory, and effectively handing their buddy that seat. That's exactly what he's counting on. And that's something that's extremely dangerous. And in Doug Clark's reporting from ProPublica, one of the people that he spoke to, one of the North Carolina residents that he spoke to, said essentially that today it's North Carolina, tomorrow it's going to be a different state. Because imagine the blueprint, the textbook blueprint that Republicans will have if they are able to successfully overturn the results of this election in the state of North Carolina. After a Democrat rightfully won her seat after 2 recounts that affirmed her victory. And we are going to try to overturn it with the North Carolina State Supreme Court because his buddies sit on the court. And he calls, some of the justices, or at least one of them, a mentor. These premeditated, coordinated attacks on democracy are not just happening at the federal level, they are also happening in states, in your local government. We got a chance to speak with ProPublica investigative reporter Doug Clark about this through an audio interview, and I want to play it for you here because I feel like this interview is essential in terms of his take on this, in terms of him doing actual investigative reporting about this, but also just really the end goal here in getting inside Griffin's head in terms of what exactly is behind this movement and what exactly he is looking to accomplish further. Watch. In your reporting, you discussed how what's happening in North Carolina was sort of premeditated. Months before the November election, a group of election skeptics gathered on a call to discuss what actions they could take if anyone doubted the results. Two people on the call rejected it, calling it voter suppression and that it would fail 100% in the courts. Republican Jefferson Griffin is now using that same strategy, and there's a real possibility that this could work. As someone who's been covering this, what do you make of that, and what's happening right now?
So I think it's really important to put Griffin's efforts to overturn the Riggs victory into proportion and into context here. And as you said, like this just hasn't come up out of nowhere. So I was able to retain a recording of a phone call in which a lot of right-wing activists were meeting and were discussing what they were going to do in the 2024 election. This recording was made in the summer of 2024. And on it, they discussed this plan to challenge any sort of close election loss by candidates that they favored, that they thought should win. And the way they were going to do it was by, claiming that votes were invalid according, by this administrative error that the state election board had made, but which judges have found is not a real problem. And the plan that some of them laid out was, well, we could point to this administrative error, we could point to some missing driver's license information in these voter registrations and say, these people's ballots shouldn't have counted. But this idea was too extreme even for a lot of these right-wing activists. As you said, one said, that's voter suppression. Another said, this is gonna fail in court. And yet, once the election really was close and Jefferson Griffin needed a way to contest the results, he ended up going with what is largely the plan that these right-wing activists laid out. They sort of brought up these pretexts or these reasons, and he's using those reasons as the basis for his lawsuits.
Mm. What have you been hearing from pro-democracy activists about this, but also citizens that have, as you've reported, are afraid that their votes will be among those tossed out? What have they been saying to you?
So I've heard from dozens and dozens of citizens who've been challenged by Jefferson Griffin, and a lot of them are shocked. They followed the rules when voting. They didn't do anything wrong. The rules that the state election board had laid out were very clear. They followed them. And now Griffin is trying to essentially change the rules after the election. He says, I don't think that the way that these rules were executed was lawful, but the rules for the election were the rules. And now they're saying, and now people are shocked that even after following those rules, they might have their votes discounted.
How long does he plan to drag this out? I mean, I know that litigation is still going on, and it's sort of going back between the appeals court and the North Carolina Supreme Court. What exactly is the end goal here in terms of the groups that are backing him?
So right now, the Court of Appeals is hearing this, and Griffin has made clear that he would like to have the North Carolina Supreme Court, where he has a lot of allies, be the sort of final arbiter of this matter. As ProPublica reported, a lot of these people's families have made financial contributions to Griffin's campaign. He's called their Chief Justice a mentor. Griffin would like to have his immediate allies on the Supreme Court be the ones to decide it. And, you can guess, or others can sort of try and figure out why that would be.
In your reporting, there was this one piece that sort of struck me. It was about the people who are concerned about their votes being tossed out. And one of the residents in North Carolina said, today it's North Carolina, tomorrow it's a different state. This is something that's going to be part of sort of like a national effort in regard to voter suppression. Um, in terms of this from a legal stance, are we more likely to see this happen across the country?
So this is a pretty unique situation, and I've talked to a lot of experts who said, they don't really think that Griffin has a lot of legal basis here.
Mm.
Um, but he has spent a lot of time, a lot of money trying to get it in front of his allies on the North Carolina Supreme Court, where whatever they say would be the final word for the state. It's possible this could be appealed in federal court, but it would be very hard to do so. And if this works, what's to stop other people in other states from trying something similar?
Once again, that was my exclusive interview with ProPublica investigative reporter Doug Clark on the North Carolina Supreme Court seat race. And there haven't been much developments in terms of litigation since I spoke to Mr. Clark. But there was this. Darn, I'm not sure that's going to help your reputation, or maybe people just don't care. I don't know. I mean, look at the political climate in 2025. So that happened this week. And the North Carolina Supreme Court race is one thing that you should be keeping an eye on, but also there's another concerted effort to effectively buy a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, where Elon Musk has poured millions of dollars into his preferred Republican candidate. I mentioned there are a lot of important local elections that are coming up this week. This is one of them. We're going to be having special reporting on Wednesday following the election results, huge pivotal races that are coming up. But just to circle back on Wisconsin here for a second, what's happening there is so vital, and it's also dangerous, that it's good that it's starting to get some national light on this race, specifically because Elon Musk and other billionaires are actively pumping in millions of dollars to get the Republican elected here. Right now, there is a vacancy on the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. And come Tuesday, voters will be able to fill that empty seat with a new justice. And the stakes are very high in this election because currently the liberals have a 4-3 majority. If Republicans win this election, that would put Democrats in the minority and allow Republicans in the state Supreme Court to do all kinds of things like approve voter suppression measures, allow abortion bans to go through, or anything else that can be done to strip away minority rights and democratic power. And the way elections work in Wisconsin is that the race doesn't happen where when you go to vote, you see like an R for Republican or a D for Democrat next to a candidate's name. That does not happen. But their political affiliations are made known. And the woman on the left side of your screen here is Susan Crawford. She is the liberal-leaning Dane County Circuit judge. And the man on the right side of your screen here is former state Republican Attorney General Brad Schmiel. And this election is extremely important. We're going to be doing a deeper dive on this on Wednesday right after the results. But just think about this for a second. Because what is the ultimate goal here? Elon Musk has poured millions of dollars into, he poured $250 million into getting Trump elected, and is now participating in the evisceration of the federal government. Okay, so that was his first trial and win. And what Musk is doing now is he's trying to accomplish this in Wisconsin. If I can buy a local Supreme Court seat, well, anything is on the table. Nothing is out of reach for me. I can buy a governor, a state senator, a state, or any elected official I want, because who's going to stop me? And let's be crystal clear about this. There has always been billions of dollars and money in politics, whether good or bad, funneled by lobbyists and corporate interest. But what is happening here is different. It is an oligarchic form. And it seeks the destruction of civil liberties and the evisceration of the federal government. Not just the federal government, but also how state government functions too. Because to have an oligarchy in the states not only broadens the definition of states' rights, but it also endangers it. Because what you are effectively doing is holding captive state government. Holding captive federal government or eviscerating federal government is one thing. Yes, it is extremely detrimental in terms of the way that states function with, laws, and also in terms of monetary support from the federal government. But also to eviscerate the state government or to effectively hold it captive by billionaire influence, then you're going to get something that's extremely more dangerous. Because if a billionaire can buy a state Supreme Court justice or just any local elected official to conduct and achieve a certain goal for that billionaire, well, then you have something that looks like succession. Because you have then succeeded in dismantling local government by holding it captive and making it beneficial for you. Because if there's anything in this country that looks most like a democracy, it's your local and your state government. Because these people get elected to represent you. They work directly for the people. The president gets elected, but then there is an electoral college process that takes place. Someone can win the presidential election in terms of the popular vote, but they can still lose because they did not win the electoral college results. I know it's very much, weird thinking in this country in terms of the way that the system works, but that's how it works in this country. The state government is not like that, though. You get elected by the people and you work for the people. If a billionaire can buy a state Supreme Court seat, then you're going to have a situation where state government no longer works for the people, it works for the billionaire. This is from the New York Times about this. Quote, a victory by the liberal candidate Susan Crawford would signify a backlash to Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk's collective stewardship of the country, giving Democrats hope that all is not lost. A triumph by the conservative contender Brad Schimmel, who is backed by more than $20 million from Mr. Musk and allied groups, would mean that the billionaire has written a new recipe for success for Trumpian office seekers around the country, while making himself, rather than the candidates, the center of attention. End quote. So rather making himself, not the candidates, the center of attention. The only reason why heads were starting to turn and to look at what's happening in Wisconsin at that Supreme Court state race is because of Elon Musk's influence into pouring millions of dollars into supporting that candidate in that election. Because if Republicans are successful in North Carolina in terms of overturning the results of that election for that state Supreme Court, and in Wisconsin, and getting this Elon Musk pro-Trump backed guy on the Supreme Court, mark my words, this will be the new blueprint on how to capture the courts across the country. You can't win the election, contest the results, and make sure that you have buddies on the Supreme Court in your favor who will definitely overturn the results of the election to get you on. Run for the seat, and if you need help, Elon Musk and other billionaires with your best interests will make sure that you get elected. Because once again, we need to stop having activist judges, especially since we've been losing so much in the federal courts as we're trying to eviscerate the federal government. So let's put in place judges in the state government so we can destroy state government too. And that way we'll have judges that'll be able to back us judicially. Because then we can just hold captive all three branches of government. Let's go after state governments because state governments work for the people. The federal government also works for the people, but there is a whole different system in the way that works. So let's go after the state governments. States' rights, right? That's what Ronald Reagan talked about. And we are actively seeing we're kind of seeing that happening right now in real life. In multiple parts of the federal government. Because, what this looks like is that if the Republicans win on Tuesday, they not only get more power, they also get to continue their voter suppression in Wisconsin in terms of the gerrymandering lines. But if Democrats win on Tuesday, this would help get rid of those gerrymandering lines, which in effect would result in 2 House seats opening up for Democrats in their favor. If Republicans won on Tuesday, it would advance Donald Trump's agenda and assist in his federal government annihilation. I mentioned that Musk is trying to buy this seat and that all of this is extremely dangerous. Of course, because a billionaire assuaging his influence into an election, a state election for a state Supreme Court race. I mentioned that because if you recall during the 2024 election, Elon Musk did something where he was going to like pay people to like vote for Trump, or pay people to be like, hey, if you vote for Trump, you get like this huge check and stuff. So he did that for the 2024 election. He's doing the exact same thing. It's not funny. You have to laugh to deal with the trauma because this is extremely depressing and enraging. He's paying people effectively to vote for the Republican. And because of that, he has just been sued by the Democratic Attorney General there after saying this on X, quote, "I will also personally hand over 2 checks for $1 million each in appreciation for you taking the time to vote. This is super important." That's not voter suppression to you, or like voter, persuasion. That's literally election interference. That's literally the kindergarten textbook definition for election interference. You do not pay people to vote. Neither do you promise people a financial reciprocal outcome if they vote for a specific candidate which you are actively and politically trying to back. That is not how government works. Corruption! Scream corruption! Somebody scream corruption. Honestly, guys, that is not how government works at all. That is not how elections work. You cannot pay people to vote for a political candidate. That is illegal. That is illegal. Nonetheless, here we are in 2025 with a billionaire trying to assuage his influence, his monetary influence over yet another election. And so that is happening again. I mean, he is literally trying to get people to vote and then hand them millions of dollars. So he tweeted that earlier this week, and then oops, he took it down. But it's too late. That lawsuit is already in effect. The Wisconsin's Democratic Party chair, Ben Wilker, has told Midas Touch in an exclusive interview that Musk committed a state felony when he said that. So there is a lot that is happening around that race. So North Carolina, Wisconsin, pay attention to those races and those seats. Pay attention to what's happening there. Florida. Tuesday is also an election day for Floridians, where it is a very red district. Democrat Gay Vallimont is looking to defeat Trump-backed Republican Jimmy Patronis. He went on Fox News earlier last week, recently scared about the fact that this race is too close, and that he's being outspent, and that she's even reaching Republican voters who are angry about what Trump and Elon Musk are doing. This is reporting from local news a couple days ago about that election.
I believe I can win. We would have never started this if we didn't think we could win.
But Gay Vallimont knows she faces an uphill battle in what is considered to be the most conservative congressional district in Florida. Her Republican opponent, Jimmy Patronis, Florida's chief financial officer, beat 9 opponents in the primary and nearly doubled their vote total combined. And he knows that's largely due to his selection by and endorsement from Donald Trump.
I tell people, when President Trump called me to ask me to do this job, he says, well, I want you to do it. So what are you going to do? You going to tell the guy no?
Well, Jimmy said over and over again, I want to work for Donald Trump, and has never said, I want to work for the people of Northwest Florida.
But Patronis says he will stand up to Trump if necessary.
Quote, if necessary. He's not going to stand up to Trump. I mean, come on. I will stand up to Trump. Representative says he'll stand up to Trump if necessary. He's not going to stand up to Trump. I mean, come on, let's be real about this. We've given Republicans enough grace and enough opportunities, but they've all collectively failed. First, in 2016, when they nominated this guy to be the president in the first place, now they're contending with the fact that he's actually president and all this stuff is happening. Oh, I don't know, maybe don't choose the reality TV star to be the president of the United States. Maybe let's stop picking reality TV hosts and actors to be presidents at all. Remember, because Ronald Reagan was an actor prior to becoming governor of California and then becoming president of the United States right in succession. I don't know. It's something with the Republicans and picking actors to be their people in politics. It's absolutely asinine. Because you look at Ronald Reagan and what he did to the federal government and what he did in major parts being connected initially really to the first real Project 2025 agenda before it was Project 2025. And now what Donald Trump is doing, guys, you think it's... Anyways. What was I talking about here? Okay. Gay Vallimont, she is running to be the Democrat. She's running as a Democrat candidate in this election. And of course, the Republican there is pro-Trump, and he really is running a candidate that is just, pro-Trump fully. And it's really Gay Vallimont that is out here campaigning for the people directly. I mean, this is directly from her TikTok account, speaking to voters and really going door to door and talking to people, having one-on-one conversations.
I was running against Matt Gaetz last time. He didn't live here. He didn't care about you and never passed one bill. But now I'm running against somebody that, well, he's not here either. Oh, when I get there, I'm going to puff my chest out and I'm going to take it all here. And I'm going to beat them. I'm going to beat them because I'm looking at you in your face and I know what you need. I know that I will take care of you and I will take care of this district. I have the passion to do it. I know I can do it. We have a shot to make this right.
If you are in Northwest Florida and Wisconsin and you're alive and eligible to vote, go vote. Your elections matter. Your country needs you. More importantly, your local and state government needs you, because you really have to pay attention to what's happening here. Once again, if Democrats are able to flip that seat on Tuesday, that will make them numerically closer to controlling the House of Representatives, which already has a very slim Republican majority, because Donald Trump decided to pick so many Republicans out of the House. Like, they just won a huge decisive victory in Congress. They did not. Once again, no one told him that, and now it appears that they are starting to reap the consequences of doing that. So that's happening right now. So once again, if you are in Northwest Florida or Wisconsin and you're live and eligible to vote, go vote. Your local elections matter. This matters specifically. It was just this past week, of course, a Pennsylvania Democrat named James Malone won in a 23-plus Republican district, which was a major upset to the Trump-Musk agenda. And because they won that state special election, Democrats are now feeling energized. Last week, Democrats also won a special election in Pennsylvania, essentially keeping them in control of the state house. Another win for the Democrats. We're going to have special reporting on abortion rights in this country in terms of what Democrats are trying to do, essentially to fight back as Republicans are trying to make abortion rights even more restrictive. But the movement that is happening right there in the state specifically. So I will just end on a hopeful note here. Yesterday, there was a local election in Louisiana. You may not have known this. You may not have heard about this, to vote on 4 new amendments for the state's constitution. And Louisiana voters showed up to the polls and they rejected all 4 of these new amendments that were proposed to be introduced to the Louisiana state constitution, favored by Republican Governor Jeff Landry. And you can kind of get why as I'm getting into the article. It reads here, quote, Louisiana voters overwhelmingly reject all 4 constitutional amendments. Quote, Louisiana voters overwhelmingly rejected 4 proposed constitutional amendments which aim to reshape the state's approach to justice, juvenile crime, taxation, and judicial elections. Each amendment was rejected by more than 60% of voters. This was a primal scream kind of vote, driven by robust Democratic EV turnout that I'm not seeing being offset by a strong GOP election day vote, John Colvin, an award-winning pollster, said in a post on X. It goes on essentially to describe what the amendments are. Amendment 1, expanded court powers and specialty courts. Voters rejected a measure expanding the Louisiana Supreme Court's disciplinary authority over out-of-state attorneys and allowing lawmakers to establish specialized trial courts that cross district lines. The amendment followed controversy over mass hurricane lawsuits filed by an out-of-state law firm and was challenged in court earlier this month. Amendment 1 was rejected by over 170,000 votes. Guys, this is an off-year local election. Over 170,000 votes just to reject Amendment 1. It goes on here. Amendment 2, sweeping fiscal overhaul. Amendment 2, which would have rewrote Article 5 of the Constitution. Excuse me, I am not familiar with Roman numerals, so that might not even be a 5. Of the Louisiana Constitution was rejected by over 150,000 votes. The 100-plus page overhaul includes capping state spending growth, consolidating reserve funds, shifting nearly $2 billion from education savings accounts to pay down retirement debt, and phasing out business inventory taxes. It has been a cornerstone of Landry's tax reform agenda. Amendment 3, adult prosecution for juveniles. This amendment would allow lawmakers to expand the list of crimes for which minors can be tried as adults without another constitutional vote. Authored by Senator Heather Cloud and opposed by youth justice advocates who argue the current list is already broad enough, Amendment 3 saw the most resounding rejection, a margin of over 180,000 votes. Amendment 4, judicial election timing fix. A technical amendment to align special judicial election timing with Louisiana's soon-to-be closed-party primary system was rejected by over 120,000 votes. Supporters say it prevents logistical issues when filling judicial vacancies. Opponents said the change was a minor and could have been handled by statute. It was the only measure not subjected to a legal challenge. So once again, all of these essentially were amendments that were introduced to be put into the Louisiana state constitution, and voters turned out en masse to overwhelmingly reject all 4 of them. Once again, introduced by the Republican governor, by Republicans in the state, voters turned out in an off-year election to reject all 4 of them. Remarkable. People are paying attention. Once again, just because certain people aren't protesting doesn't mean they're not going to participate in their right to vote, which still exists in this country, despite the chaos and the craziness that is happening. That is going to do it for today's video, our special report on what's going on in the states. I did mention we're going to have some more reporting because there's more stuff that's happening in the states right now in terms of abortion rights. We're going to have special reporting on what's been happening in the states with abortion rights. So that's going to be coming up in a new video, as well as what's happening with LGBTQ rights in terms of those being attacked in the states as well. That's going to be coming out tomorrow here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. So be on the lookout for that. Please be sure to comment any suggestions, questions, or your thoughts on this video. It is good to be back. I'm so glad that you all are so supportive of me. Those of you who sent in financial donations, I appreciate it. Your kind words, your compliments, your grace, I'm eternally grateful for it. So thank you very much. If you are a fan of the show, please recommend it to your family and your friends. You can also support us by donating financially, as this is independent journalism and we rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. A huge and heartfelt thank you to all of you who have supported me by either getting my book or sending in money. Your donations and your generosity do not go unnoticed. I am eternally grateful again. Be sure to follow us on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News. If you have any questions, news topic request, or want to do a collaboration, you can email me at tjpsnews. You can email me, which is tjpsnews@gmail.com. All right, all of you, it's good to be back. I will be uploading much more videos this week as we are returning officially. All right, let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you want me to cover. I'll see you soon.